And if people don't take the time to get out, and I get concerned after coming off of this period where people are doing so many things virtually, if you don't get to see it hands-on, you just can't learn at the same level. I can show you video after video, I can describe, but until you're in that factory, you see it working, you smell it, you hear it, it's all of that you fully understand how something works. And this is a challenge that our industry is going to face going forward, is this education and understanding of new technologies.
Hey, thanks for being here. That's Tricia Carey, an apparel and textile industry veteran who's seen all the progress and changes that have occurred since her first job working in the then all-domestic manufacturing supply chain back in the mid-90s. Today, she's a well-known and internationally respected advocate for innovation and circularity, a topic that everybody is talking about in the textile and apparel industry. Currently, Tricia is the Chief Commercial Officer at Renewcell, a very exciting, fast-growing Swedish textile company with a plan to recycle the equivalent of more than 1.4 billion t-shirts every year by 2030 with their flagship technology and product, CIRCULOSE. But before that, Tricia spent more than 20 years in various commercial management positions at Lenzing, the multi-billion-dollar global producer of wood-based specialty fibers based in Austria. She's held roles in marketing and business development and has participated in numerous collaborative collections with mills and brands. Needless to say, she knows a lot about this space. Our talk does get a little technical, specifically on the topics of Renewcell's Circulose product, pulp, fiber, yarns, and fabrics. So to be sure we're clear, Circulose is not a fiber, it's not a yarn or a fabric. It's a 100% recycled raw material input used for textile fibers. It's a dissolving pulp that replaces the wood pulp that's usually used to make viscose, modal, lyocell, and acetate. These are fabrics that are likely in your closet or maybe even on your bed. The cool thing about Circulose, it's made out of 100% unused textiles. And that's a better phrase than what we might have said before, which might have been textile waste. Tricia points this out in our conversation. And brands are using Circulose to replace those high-impact raw materials like fossil fuel-based inputs like polyester or nylon, maybe cotton, in their textile products. I've followed Tricia's work for years, and we've crossed paths multiple times, but this was my first opportunity to really get to sit down with her and talk about the state of sustainability in the apparel industry. We dive into her career path, the changes that she's seen in the apparel and textile industry, the progress we're making, and the challenges that still lie ahead, specifically when it comes to circularity. Tricia is so knowledgeable and has so much insight into the making of these goods, the marketing and the selling of them, and the levers that need to be pulled in order for us to see the real change that we want to see in the fashion industry. If you're wondering how to have a career in sustainability or circularity, and especially one in the apparel industry, you don't want to miss any part of my chat here with Tricia. She dialed in from her New York apartment, so you'll hear a little bit of the city sounds in the background, but as she told me right before we started recording, that's exactly where she likes to be, right in the heart of all the action. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Tricia Carey, Chief Commercial Officer at Renewcell, as much as I did. A lot of great takeaways in here, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Tricia. Thanks. Welcome to Good Things Happening, the show that explores the sustainability progress that's being made just under the surface at your favorite brand or company. I'm your host, Derek Sabori, and these are the people making it happen. All right, you ready? I'm ready?
All right. Sounds good.
Are you in New York right now?
I am. I'm in New York, yeah.
Well, Tricia Carey, thank you so much for being here and making time out of your busy day, because I know you've got a lot going on out there in New York. So thank you for being here on the Good Things Happening show.
Thank you, Derek. Great to join. I've really found your episodes to be very enlightening.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. And I know this one's going to add a lot of value as well. There's so many great things we're going to talk about, but you are the Chief Commercial Officer at Renewcell, a really exciting, rapidly growing company in the circular economy. And we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about your role, about the complexities of the circular economy. But if you could, can you start with kind of giving us a high-level pitch of yourself, your role, and the company?
Sure. So a little bit about Renewcell, and then I'll talk about myself and my role there. So Renewcell is a sustained tech company that recycles unused cotton textiles into a dissolving pulp, which we are branding that as CIRCULOSE in order to make new viscose modal or lyocell fibers. This is done at our factory in Sundsvall, Sweden, which we call Renewcell 1. And that's where we take this process, where we have the process of taking these cellulosic rich textiles, so cotton rich textiles. We use a lot of denim, but it can be knits or wovens. And we can manage a small amount of synthetics, 5 to 10%. The process that we go through in order to make our pulp is it goes through a mechanical shredding. Then it goes through a pulp process, which is a wet process where we have fiber separation as well as color removal. And then it is the drying process in order to make a sheet that looks kind of like this that you can see. We opened this facility in November of 2022, and we've been shipping since the end of December, our pulp, our Circulose pulp. And last month, we shipped 2,500 tons of Circulose pulp going to fiber producers. 70% of all man-made cellulosic fibers are produced in China. So we do ship around the world from our facility in Sweden. We are ramping this facility up. Our first stage is to get to 60,000 tons of pulp per year. And then the next ramp up will be 120,000 tons of pulp. And we've already been working from our pilot line with brands that people know, like H&M, Inditex, Zara, Levi's, PVH, as well as some the more sustainably oriented brands like Triarchy, Philippa K, Gani. So we've already been working out in the market. As you mentioned, I am Chief Commercial Officer. I joined in November of 2022 after working at Lenzing Fibers for almost 25 years. So my background has been quite extensively within the man-made cellulosic fiber market. And I'm based in New York. I oversee the pulp sales, the business development, and the marketing and branding side of the commercial aspect of Circulose at Renewcell. So very exciting time in being able to build within the circular economy, which we'll talk about more.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot in there. So hopefully everybody got a sense of what the technology is. And real quick, I guess, for those that may not be in the space, man-made cellulosic fibers, those are fibers, because I always notice too, I tell people, look inside your clothes, look at your label, identify what your product is made of, and even, look to where it was made. But lyocell, you said lyocell, tencel, modal, viscose, those are fibers, those are man-made cellulosic fibers, as you said, and those are typically made from wood. Is that right? And so
Correct.
You guys are taking out that equation and producing a similar cellulosic material or fiber, or dissolving pulp to
Correct.
make that similar fiber out of textile waste, right? So at this point, can people just turn in their clothes and have them made into new fibers?
Well, that's kind of a simple way of putting it. And so you have to bring it to the right place in order to have it recycled. But
yeah.
Yes, I mean, there's collectors and sorters, and this is where the systems are really developing within the industry, because textile recycling is less than 1% of all textiles are actually being recycled now. And so there needs to be an increase in the organization around collecting and sorting. That's not only geographically, but it's also what they're collecting and sorting for, because they need to be sorting for materials that then can be used again and be recycled, like what we're looking for. And this, I think, will take a bit of time. But there are some take-back programs that you've seen maybe in different retail stores. Also, another source of recycling textiles is through companies like Goodwill. Now, we do have legislation that's coming into place in the United States that will make textile recycling mandatory. They already have that in Massachusetts. That passed November 1st of last year, and more states will be coming on with this. And we could probably have a whole show just on policy changes. Europe is much further ahead, the European Green Deal, with many of the regulations coming into effect in 2025, which will have EPR, extended producer responsibility, that retailers and brands will be responsible for how clothing that they sell will have to be disposed of. So this is where the systems are going to have to change, and very exciting for us at Renewcell because we're at the forefront of this. Yeah. And we are pioneering and scaling just at the right time in order to bring those solutions, because it's going to be very challenging when all this textile waste is collected, sorted, and then where does it go?
So, okay. So that's kind of the big picture. And I kind of baited you with that one because it's so complex. It's not quite as simple as turn in your shirt and we'll make something new out of it right there on the spot. But I do want to, before we dive into all of that, the circular economy and the systems approach that it's going to take, your career has been really impressive. It's been, like you said, it's been long. It seems like you always knew through your education, coming up through your college work, were you always set and bound to be in the apparel and textile industry? Is that what you wanted to do since you were young? Seems like you always knew you'd be here.
I did kind of always knew I wanted to be here. As a kid, I would play with fashion plates. I don't know. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there was this... there was a game that you would have and you would be able to color in different designs. And ironically, when I was growing up, I went to a private school where I had a uniform. So I would study the fashion magazines. You know, that August edition, September edition of Vogue, I would literally study every page. And being the youngest of three girls, I dealt with a lot of hand-me-downs because my mom was... one of the pioneers in my life around sustainability, because she would say, there's nothing wrong with these pants or this dress. You need to wear it. And I would look at it and I would cringe and say, oh, no, I don't want to. And of course, you realize the importance of apparel as an expression, and especially as a teenager. So I did learn how to sew in order to fix those clothes. That was my way around it. And when I was starting to take sewing lessons, then I had appreciation really for textiles and realized that if you don't start with the right fabrics, your garments just aren't worthwhile at all. And as the foundation for any apparel, having the right fabrics is essential. So that kind of led me into my interest around textiles. And that grew from there when I went to college, and I wound up going to FIT as a one-year student, kind of a visiting student for a year, and fell in love with being in New York City. So from there, I always knew I wanted to work in New York City and be a part of the textile industry. And so after a couple of different positions, I started off at a domestic heat transfer company when I first graduated, and then I worked on the buying side in a women's apparel company called Susan Bristol. Mm-hmm. And that was also very interesting. And this was a time in the mid 90s when the textile and fashion industry was domestic. It was still all made here in the US, or That's majority right. of it. So I kind of went through that transformation around 2000 and the early 2000s when there was the opening up of Asia and China, where more textile and apparel was being sourced at that time. And in 98, I joined a company called Quartals. They launched a new fiber in 1992. It was called Tensile Lyocell. And that's where I spent, from 1998 through several decades, and 2 children later. You kind of sometimes measure your career when you had your kids too.
That's right.
So that's also a part of it. And I think it's intertwined in one's career is family life as well.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit about, I look back as well in my opportunity to be a part of that domestic supply chain. Not everybody got to be a part of that. What a big learning experience that was. So I think for you going through that transition, I do want to know, talk a little bit about what those early days were like compared to today, but also getting that job at Quartal or Lenzing, which we know it as. What was that like? Because did that project you into that new space? That seemed like a bigger job, big opportunity. Obviously, you were there for so many years. So tell me about that transition and what that was like.
Sure. In 98, when I joined Quartals, it was exciting because it was a global company based out of the UK, launching this new product. Everything was new. You got to meet interesting people. I always enjoy meeting people from other cultures and how we can do business. And even to this day, sometimes I'll be reflecting on a conversation and I'll be like, well, it is a part of that that person's culture, or that's how their company works. And that I think is an important part, an exciting part of the global apparel industry. So in 98, when I joined there, I think I never really knew, I never planned to stay for so long. In 2004, Cortals had spun off Tencel, and that's when Lenzing bought Tencel. So then I rolled into the Lenzing group. And there, I would say I went through about probably a 10-year period where I was very focused on my family and my young kids. So I did work part-time. And I think it's important, especially as you mentioned, you have some listeners who are younger and getting started in the industry. It is important to take some time. And you don't always have companies that will support you through those times when you have a young family. So I was part-time for quite a bit. And then I came back, and that's when things had picked up. And actually, that's when this, with the, at that time, it was the BlackBerry was around, because the industry was quite different when you didn't have, when I started, there was no email.
That's right.
You could call people, you would have faxes. I remember, I was faxing confirmations. It was quite different. So also going through that transformation. But within Lenzing, I am very grateful for the time that I had there. I learned a lot. I also feel I contributed quite a bit to the development of Tencel. I was able to try different ideas and test out projects, had many, many fiber launches over the years. And one in particular that I really enjoyed was a fiber launch that started in 2015 and finally came to the market in 2017. And that was a fiber called Refibra. And this was Tencel lyocell with Refibra technology, which was bringing in circularity. So using a pulp that came from recycled materials. So similar to what we are producing with Circulose. And that was really quite early in looking at the circular economy and developing materials. And in many ways, it was before the market was even ready. It's all about that right product mix, right? The product, price, place, and promotion is so key in having the right mix and bringing a new material or a new idea into the market. And over the time at Lenzing, towards the end, then I was managing the global business focused on the denim industry, which is an incredible industry to be a part of, very innovative, a lot of vertical suppliers, some amazing, very driven people within the denim industry, as well as leading the Americas business development side of the business.
I want to ask, how did you know? It seems like, you found your way here through fashion, for your love of fashion, but it seems like you really sort of detoured and really turned to the business side of things, business development, obviously now commercializing products, launching brand products. Do you remember sort of a specific moment where you're like, you know what, this is the direction I want to go. I want to lean into this business management side of things. How was that journey? What's that been like?
I would say the aha moment for me on textiles, besides I was saying with the sewing end, so I appreciated textiles. But when I took the Textile 101 class at FIT, the one where you have the swatch book and you have to cut up the swatches and you have your pick glass.
Yep.
That part really intrigued me because there's something tangible, there's something real, it's measurable around textiles. And then I would say it was this next evolution that I had when I got to visit some of the mills. And I think this part of having feet on the ground and visiting mills, which I had my first trip to China in 1997. And then I could really see and understand, and it intrigued me, the business. There's a creative part to it. And yet there's this business side as well to it. And I think this is always the challenge within the textile industry, is how the two can come together. And I do feel that, and even now, I enjoy taking groups to see the factory. I was there 2 weeks ago with a group of 20 people to see how we make Circulose. And if people don't take the time to get out, and I get concerned after coming off of this period where people are doing so many things virtually. If you don't get to see it hands-on, you just can't learn at the same level. I can show you video after video, I can describe, but until you're in that factory, you see it working, you smell it, you hear it, it's all of that you fully understand how something works. And this is a challenge that our industry is going to face going forward, is this education and understanding of new technologies.
Yeah, I'd love to insert a clap, and, an applause here at this point, because you're so right. I mean, those opportunities to go visit factory floors and visit every part of the value chain. I mean, that is crucial insight, because I think even for people who want to get into sustainability, that you sort of have these, it's easy to say, well, we should be doing X, Y, and Z. You must, you have to, we need to. And I think it's not until you've been there and see the people, how things are managed, the pace at which it works, the cost pressures, margin pressures, delivery pressures, everything kind of playing all into itself at once, that you start to kind of go, ooh, okay, this is really complex. There are a lot of moving parts here. And yeah, there are a lot of people, involved at different parts of the value chain. So you're so right for people to get out there. And if you can, get on that first trip, that opportunity to go and see the value chain, the value network out there, right?
For sure. And understand, the cultures of different companies.
Very important.
I always feel that when someone comes, that they become like mini ambassadors, because they understand at another level. And more than anything, it's not about companies doing business together. It's people that do business together. And this part is also what I really see in the textile industry, is the relationships and the connections that you have over the years.
What I'm fascinated by is since those early days, it doesn't seem like you've worked for a US-based company. So you've been sort of a global ambassador, right? Working for European companies, traveling the world, promoting circularity, promoting, more sustainable fibers. So, which leads me to the fact that you're also really involved, not just at your very busy role, but also on boards. I mean, you're a member of, multiple boards. You're very involved in just pushing the industry forward. How did that happen? And why has it been such an important part for you professionally to be on these boards?
Yeah, it happened by chance. I would say one time I was at a textile exchange conference, and I think, that's where we might have first met, as some of the TE conferences. Mm-hmm. And remember, they used to be quite small, and you would be able to talk to everyone that was at the conference. And at one conference, and it was the one in Seattle, I remember a dear friend of mine now, Darren Abney, who started talking to me, and I was sort of then in the corner between two people from TE saying, well, why don't you join the board? And I thought to myself, well, it could be interesting. I could learn a lot. And I did. I learned quite a bit on the Textile Exchange board. I was on that board for, I think it was 4 or 5 years. And it's very interesting to understand how organizations are run. And so I was also able to provide input around having a perspective of man-made cellulosic fibers, which was important. And then as I was leaving the TE board, then another friend of mine, Carla Magruder, said, the industry is completely going to change. There's so much happening around circularity. And I remember her kind of drawing this out on a napkin over a drink and saying, well, how is this all going to connect? And these people aren't a part of our industry, the collectors and sorters, and we need to bring them in. And so then I joined the Accelerating Circularity Board, which started right before the pandemic. And that's been an incredible, very fast-moving organization. And the mission behind that around scaling circular solutions and looking at what's missing in order for the industry to grow has been really a fun and interesting project to be involved in and be on the board there. And then now I'm also on the Transformers Foundation, which is coming out of Kingpins and Andrew Ola and Emily Ola, what they're working towards, which is also bringing a more just and unified industry and including the social side. And here, I think it's very important. We look at what happened during the pandemic to many of the factories whose orders were cut. Yeah. How do we prevent that? How do we make sure that the industry evolves at the right level? And then also I got involved in the Fashion Impact Fund, which has sponsored the Conscious Fashion and Lifestyle Network as an affiliation with the United Nations. So I would say getting involved in these different organizations, it was sort of educational. It's also great to meet other people who are like-minded. And I feel like I can contribute towards making an impact. And that's always been very important for me, because it's not just about my job, but how can I also change this industry for a better way? That's where I found a lot of understanding around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in forming how the industry needs to evolve. And this is where the United Nations didn't really have a lot of input from the fashion industry. Yet when you look at the size of it and how much it impacts people globally, it really should. And that's where, being here in New York City, the UN is just right down the block. It makes sense that we could have a stronger voice as an industry there. So yes, being a part of boards has been something now for, I guess, almost the past 10 years or so. And I find it very rewarding.
Yeah, and it seems like you've just sort of had this bigger picture mentality of really wanting to contribute, drive the whole ship forward, not just your little part of it, but kind of, help steer the whole vessel, which I know I really appreciate. And I know everybody else in the industry for sure is appreciating as well, because I think there are a lot of good things happening in the apparel industry. And I think this industry was also early, I think, to adopt and recognize that there were challenges, hear the critiques, and start to act on them. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of coordinating that effort and getting everybody kind of firing on the same, cylinders. But I do think there's been a lot of great work. And that leads me to, Renewcell, a company, a great example of, leading innovation, technology focused, contributing to the circular economy. How did that opportunity come about for you? How did you guys meet? How did you come across them? Did they come across you? And what a big leap that must have been after 20 some years, with your former employer, with Lenzing, to take a big leap into this new role. What was that like?
Great question, Derek. Actually, during the pandemic, I was going through this phase of feeling somewhat confused, a bit lonely when it came to work. I had plenty of people around me, but I was questioning a lot of things. And I started doing a series of webinars, because remember, it was everyone's trying to find out. And those first couple of months, remember how popular different webinars were. And everybody was then getting on Zoom. Yep. So I started doing different webinars, and one group I was working with, the U.S. Fashion Industry Association, USFIA, Julia Hughes, and she says, "Oh, we need to get more people together." And she's like, "Could you help me? Let's do some webinars." So we did, and one of the topics that I felt people need to understand more was around circularity. So I said to Julie, "Well, why don't we get together Lenzing, Burla, and Renewcell and have one conversation?" And she says, "Oh, that's great. And let's have Canopy be the moderator." So I said, "Perfect." Now, it's a little bit uncomfortable when you're in a conversation with competitors. And
with a nonprofit group that's criticizing and saying, "Hey, we've got all these problems," right? So
it's a bit of getting out of your comfort zone. And actually, that was one experience that I had where I was able to then meet Patrick Lundstrom, who's CEO of Renewcell, and start to have a conversation with him more. And then, last year, Renewcell reached out and said, "Well, we're growing. Is this something of interest to you?" And it was kind of a lot of things merging at one time, both personally and professionally, because personally, my husband and I are empty nesters. So the kids were kind of moving on. And I was thinking, well, what is there for me? What's my next chapter? And also reaching a point of, is my career defined by primarily one company, or is there something more that I can do? And can I impact further in the development and in the building around Renewcell and bringing circularity into the market? And it was very intriguing. My first trip to Sweden was actually almost a year ago, and beautiful, beautiful country. I'd never been there before, and very much enjoying the people and culture in Sweden.
And what did you love? What enticed you about their technology? Because they're not the only one, right? But they are, I know, advancing quickly. But what intrigued you so much about that company, their technology? What excited you?
What excited me, there were a couple of things. First of all, they were building off of an industry that their country knows a lot about, which is pulp production. And if you've ever been to Sweden, I was just amazed at the number of trees that are there. It's just so rampant. But their technology and their business model was intriguing to me. The business model of making pulp, of making it plug and play, working within existing equipment. So staying focused on where that pulp should go, working closely with fiber producers to make that happen. Also found that because Renewcell is publicly listed, the support of the financial industry and their shareholders, the largest shareholder that we have is actually H&M. And then there's many other shareholders that are in Sweden. So that the high support from the industry that's there. And I found, there's a culture of care and progress. So one about caring about what we're doing and they're interconnected in order to have that progress. The knowledgeable team. I think it's very important when you look at a lot of fiber innovations or technology innovations that are coming into the market. There's over 100 innovators, if you read some of the reports, across all different materials, whether it's leather, synthetics, and cellulosics. And it's bringing new people into the textile industry, which I think is very interesting. But you also still have to know how the industry works. And I think, under the leadership of Patrick, who has been extremely resilient to continue to grow the company, he's also formed an excellent team in order to make that happen with knowledge of the textile industry and knowledge of what's happening regionally too. So there's quite a bit that I felt was interesting, and the fact that Renewcell is leading as a pioneer within the space, knowing that we can kind of then also come up with different ways of working. We don't have to have, it's not a linear system that you just turn into a circle. Right. We can come up with some new ways of doing things, and that I'm really excited about. There's some that we've already put out in the market, and there's also some new ideas that we're working on. One that we were able to, kind of think differently in the market is normally as an ingredient brand, you work off of a push and a pull within your marketing. So, you're pushing to suppliers and you're pulling through with retailers and brands. But when you really sit down and look at it, for circularity, it's different. It's actually bringing together what is the yarn spinner doing and what are they blending? What is the fabric producer? What are they adding to the fabrics? Can that be recycled again? Garment maker, what are they doing? And of course, collectors and sorters now are part of this conversation that were never there before. You also at the same time have NGOs and associations. Canopy is very supportive of next gen solutions. And you have also finance industry. So it's no longer just pushing and pulling that you're only talking to your direct customers and the channel captain, which would be a retailer or brand. You now have to encompass everyone in the conversation. So calling this encompass marketing as a way of bringing an ingredient brand and bringing a new product into the market is the way that we have to look at it going forward.
So it's sort of a whole new era of doing business. And that actually, I want to stop there for a second and kind of go back building on that, because you mentioned sort of what's needed for people. They've got to, building a team, they need to understand the industry. You need to understand sort of the process. To your point, this is a multi-stakeholder approach. We're kind of doing a holistic kind of 360, approach at it. How though, if we look back over the last 25 years, you've been in the apparel, sustainability space, circularity space for a long time now. How has it changed? What particularly stands out to you the most in terms of how the phrase, the term, what we mean by sustainability? You mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. Nobody was talking about the well, they've only been out for so long, but the SDGs really painted this picture that, hey, sustainability is this whole thing. It's like this sphere. And I think at one point we were thinking, sustainability is about conserving water or not cutting down, avoiding deforestation, saving the ocean, whatever it was. Now it is a little bit of everything. So my two questions for you are, how has sustainability evolved and changed to where we're at today, to what Renewcell is working on? And why is it so important that people really understand, for people that want to get into sustainability, why is it so important that they understand the business? So those are kind of combined questions.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, Derek, because sustainability, first of all, as an industry, we needed to define that, right? Because it was getting overused, misused. And when I first started with Tencel, no one asked anything about where it was coming from. We didn't even know what trees were being used. And if someone did ask us, about the trees, we'd say, oh, they're the tree huggers, and not sure who wants to answer that letter. Like, there weren't the questions. And this was, 1998, 2000. People weren't even asking the questions. But then those questions came along, and they came from the leaders in the industry, Patagonia, I think Fisher, that top of the pyramid who really focused and built their business around lower impacts. And I try to stay away from the word sustainability because it can mean so many different things. And I think circularity is becoming the new sustainability of a word that's
True.
Not clearly defined because it can mean many different things. But what's happened over the years, and I would say, and I've seen this too through my time in being involved in organic exchange, which became textile exchange. And the room was very small. As I said, you used to have a couple hundred people. You would talk to everyone at the conference. Yeah. Now there's almost 2,000 people, and you can't even find everyone in the room. That's how crowded the space has become. But I think what's happened over time is people started asking more questions because they started to really understand, and this transparency, traceability became a big part of that. We also started looking at ways to measure more. Once you have metrics behind it, and there's been so much around sustainability, what that cost, what the true cost of making garments is, not only on the environment, but also on the social side. I think the social aspect has only come into play in the past couple of years as we've seen more conversation around forced labor, more around fair wages, living wages. So I think this evolution has happened because there is an awareness, because there's a greater within society from food to, every farm to table kind of became, all right, how does that relate then? And the connection of food to apparel and you look at what's happened in the automotive industry. So it's become a whole lifestyle. And within that, then you also have people questioning about apparel too. So this change has taken quite a bit, but the beauty of our industry is that every season we have an opportunity to change. Not all industries have that. If you look at whether a company is working off of your fast fashion and you're working off of many seasons of having drops every 2 weeks, or if you're, working off of 6 seasons, it gives you that opportunity to change. This isn't like car models that only change every 4 years.
Right.
So it's how we can really look at that. And the second part to your question, I think really we have to look at long term. It can't be around short term. And this is the challenge that the industry's in right now, is the short-term pain for long-term gain that we need to have. The investment that needs to happen, whether it's in materials or in equipment or regional sourcing, which will evolve. And a lot of this is going to come under the influence of the policy changes that are happening too.
So there's a lot of different levers at play here. So we'll dive into those. I want to kind of now come back, I guess, to Renewcell, the CIRCULOSE technology, and I want to talk about the progress that you've seen the company make. And early on, when we first started the conversation here, you threw out some numbers as to how much textile waste was being recycled, how much is on board. My first question is that a lot, relatively speaking? And secondly, I guess just tell me about some of the highlights. You talked about the recycling facility, the new one that is up. You've talked about the new network. Can you tell me about some of the highlights that you're most excited about that are happening right now, and or maybe what's on the horizon too that you can talk about?
Sure. Yeah, with Renewcell, I feel like we're a speedboat moving along very quickly. We opened the facility in Students Fall that's getting up to 120,000 tons of pulp. Giving some relation on that, what does that really look like? Well, there's 7 million tons of man-made cellulosic fibers, viscose, modal, and lyocell that's produced every year.
So there you go.
So it still is a very small portion.
Yeah.
We have stated to our shareholders that we want to grow to 360,000 tons of pulp by 2030. And at our first Capital Markets Day we had in May, we even said, well, what would it look like potentially if we even got up to 1 million tons of pulp by 2030? So
Wow.
we're starting to even look at, now that we have production running, and we've been shipping out now for, 7 months, we can say, all right, we've got this under our belt. What do we want to tackle next? So very exciting for us is the reception and the innovation that's happening within our suppliers in China. We work very closely with a supplier called Sanyu. They are a green shirt supplier in China, as well as Even Grace, also a green shirt. And we do have long-term contract with Lenzing, and we have 8 LOIs with other fiber producers around the world. So we are working very closely with them as they develop. Most of the fiber producers right now are working at a 30% blend level. So our Circulose pulp comes from 100% recycled textiles, and the fiber producer is blending Circulose plus their wood pulp. So they're blending 30% Circulose pulp and 70% FSC certified wood pulp. This is a way for them to start in that ramp up. Now, some of the suppliers who've been working on this longer are now moving up to, or planning to move up to 50% Circulose, 50% FSC wood pulp. Wow. And the reason why I want to highlight this is because what I'm hearing from designers, from retailers and brands, they'll say to me, well, what percentage? Is it traceable? What's the tenacity? So what's the strength of the fiber? What supply chains are you already working with? And of course, what's the price and how can it be lower than existing virgin materials? And then I kind of say, well, wait, what's most important to you, right? Because we can do it. We just can't do it all at one time. And typically what I'm hearing from designers, and this is all driven by policy, is that it's important to have recycled blend content that's high. The higher you can start with, then the more you do with other blends, then you can still keep a very high percentage of recycled content. Therefore, getting to 50%, and even we have Sanyu in China who's made a statement that they want to get to 100% Circulose in the viscose fiber by the end of next year. So having this high ambition for blending is very important in the market. We now have 1.3 as well as 1.6 D-Tex viscose staple. That might get a little technical, but it's basically different fiber sizes, which is important. We've been working with the fiber producers around viscose, but we anticipate having lyocell beginning of next year. We have a supplier also in China that's signed an LOI, and their intention to develop Circulose with lyocell fiber production. And we also have filament too. So we've been working with Even Grace for filament viscose made with Circulose. So we have quite a bit on the innovations coming into the market. Last week we launched our Circulose supplier network. With the Circulose supplier network, here we have 47 suppliers who we've been working with. And I've done quite a few fiber launches over the decades. And what I've noticed and what I've been able to learn from those is sometimes you have suppliers who take a bale, make a big story, put out a splash, and then they move on to the next thing in the next season. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to avoid this because in many ways that's innovation greenwashing.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to be a part of that. So what we did in developing with fiber, with mills, with spinners, knitters, weavers, denim producers, is let's come up with a 3-year business plan. Let's look a little longer term than just one season, than one trade show. And what does that look like? What kind of volumes do you need? What kind of developments are important to the market? What are your best-selling items that you could replace viscose with viscose made with Circulose? And let's talk about how we bring this story together to the market and co-branding. And with those 3 points, then the spinners, knitters, weavers, and denim producers, they signed an LOI of their intention. And in turn, we will make sure they have access to materials, that they are up to date on new developments that are happening, and market them as well within the market to retailers and brands. So with this, it's our way of building out the Circulose supplier network and a signal to designers that, okay, you can find materials that are using recycled content with Circulose in the market. You don't have to make it from scratch. You can find it already, that you can move it into your designs. And I think that this is really an important next step for us at Renewcell.
So sounds like that was one of my questions, was about scale. It sounds like scale is a reality that's happening in real time right now. I want to ask real quick, and this is maybe a little bit of a curveball. But you mentioned some of your investors and the partners that you're already working with. You mentioned H&M and Zara, I think, right? Inditex. You're working with companies that, uh, from when I do courses and I teach people and I work with young people or aspiring sustainability pros, they're so quick to hate on H&M, for example. I have my thoughts and opinions. So I want to know from you, what role does a company like H&M play in circularity, in sustainability? Are they doing something good? Are they only doing something bad? Should people love them? Should they hate them for the work they're doing? Give me a little bit of insight with the big mega brands like this. What role do they play in driving this forward?
With the large brands, they can really make impact, and they know that they need to have solutions because of policy, and it's going to cost them more if they don't start to make this change now. It's not easy to move a large company around. You just don't do it in one season and change out everything. So it's going to take those steps, the incremental steps. Most of the larger fashion brands already have sustainability goals. Now they're building them, and I'm saying that loosely because they'll say responsible sourcing or sustainable fibers. They need to define that better, and they need to come up with a roadmap around that. We see that many of them have liked the simplicity of the Canopy pledge that they will have. Canopy will rank man-made cellulosic fiber producers, red, yellow, green shirts, and they have a whole report that comes out every year. It's very simple then for these larger global brands to say, we only want to source man-made cellulosic fibers that are from fiber producers that are green shirt. So they have that. What we need to see the industry take the next step forward with is make goals around next generation fiber solutions. So making that commitment of saying, we're going to change all of our man-made cellulosic fibers 100% to next generation sourced by 2028, whatever that is, 2030, set those goals and start to move into that. So some of them have said we want to use recycled fibers by a certain date. That I think comes into some controversy. Is recycled polyester the right move to have? We see a lot of that. Some recycled polyester, and I don't want to bash this, is not one solution out there. We have a big industry. We need many solutions. But recycled polyester from bottles that can't be recycled again, and that's the beauty with Circulose. You can recycle it again and again. So it is a next generation quality material that has an excellent hand feel and can work within existing systems, and that's really key. So you want to be able to produce products that will still last and have that durability, because quality and consumption is definitely a part of the systems change we need to have.
So let's real quick, I want to recap on that because you brought it up a few times. You mentioned green shirt rating. You talked about Canopy. So for those that may or may not know, that is Canopy, and it's an organization that rates cellulosic pulp or pulp providers, basically saying, hey, the better it's rated, there is no deforestation associated with it. It's not coming from endangered forests or boreal forests. There's traceability involved. There's safe chemicals involved. There's reclaimed water, et cetera, right? So the higher the score is, but that comes with traceability. So more and more brands are saying, hey, we need to know where our viscose or cellulose, man-made cellulosic fibers are coming from. So we're going to choose from these suppliers that have these higher ratings. This is the important work that NGOs are doing. I think it's been so important, the work that NGOs have done through the many years to drive us forward in terms of just doing things better, right?
For sure. I mean, Canopy being one. The Hot Button report also includes a section on next generation solutions. So what are these fiber producers doing to invest in those changes, and they're setting their own goals?
Yeah.
Look at some other NGOs. Changing Markets also has some excellent campaigns that educate the industry, make us think better. They all
challenge us.
They challenge us. Yep. And some are challenging to suppliers, some are more challenging to retailers and brands. But you look also, I think Textile Exchange has done a lot within traceability and certifications. Circulose is RCS certified. We just received our certification in June. So this traceability, transparency is key. And so I kind of look at it, within the triangle of, yes, you need to have circularity, traceability, transparency, but you also need to watch the carbon footprint. And I think that's overall the umbrella of around how we are defining sustainability and the points within it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So let's latch on to circularity here for a moment, because I know this is crucial to try to define. You mentioned circulose allows the product to be recycled again. I do want to ask, the inputs that you're using, are those post-consumer goods right now, or is it still industrial scrap that's being used? I'm sure it can be post-industrial, but I know the answer, I think, to this, because it's going to require collection systems. We've got to get retailers involved. Everybody has to be contributing in this space. So those two questions, right? It can be, well, I'm going to take this back. I want to define circularity. It's this idea, I think, that the end product can be recycled at the end back into another product, and do that over and over again. But is circulose able to be made with post-consumer goods at this point, or is it mostly industrial?
We have made circulose post-consumer inputs from our pilot line.
Okay.
As we're ramping up our industrial scale line, we will be adding more post-consumer waste. We also look at it as textile waste or unused textiles, because some people are staying away from the waste word. Unused textiles, they are assets, no matter whether they're post-industrial or post-consumer right now. I think the systems, again, will continue to evolve and develop. For us, it's about this scale and ramp up. We are using a lot of post-industrial unused textiles, and we will be adding in more post-consumer unused textiles. We look at having a high cellulose content, high cotton content. We can manage indigo. We can remove those dyes. We don't disassemble. We can manage polyester sewing thread. So these are all, every technology has different inputs and different specifications.
So if you had to kind of summarize it all then, and I think you've alluded to it a handful of times throughout our talk here, but let's try to summarize it for the listeners in terms of, when we're talking about circularity, what do you want people to know about it? What do you think people might get wrong about it? Maybe what do they not understand very well about circularity? Because you're right, it is such a buzzword now. And I've had people say, well, we're looking for something circular. We're looking for recycled materials. Like, that's not circular. Like, it's a bigger thing. So let's break that down a little. Talk about circularity, what it means to you guys, and what do you want people to know?
Well, circularity, there's a hierarchy to circularity. Right? First of all, we want to keep garments, we want to consume less garments, and then we want to keep them in circulation as long as possible. Yeah. So there's, rental, repair, reuse. So how do we keep what we have in motion? Then when you look at recycling, then you can kind of break that down into what can you recycle for synthetics? What is it that's mixed, say a 50-50? And then what do you have that's cellulosic rich? And from there, that's where we offer a solution, and a scalable solution, one that doesn't require just making capsules anymore, because I think this will also be changing in the industry. Large brands cannot just get by with making innovation capsules. So for us, circularity is looking at having 100% recycled textiles, having a product that can be recycled again and again, and bringing in next generation solutions to the market.
And probably doing it safely, clean chemicals, right?
Cleanly, socially responsible.
Low carbon footprint, all of it.
Low carbon footprint. There's all encompassing of that. We do also carry out audits of our suppliers of feedstock. So for any of the collectors and sorters that we're working with, because the social side of our business, as we look during this transformation, is essential.
Do you think, you were not using this type of language and probably that definition, I think probably when you were working on the early fibers that you were, maybe back with Lenzing, totally different landscape now today, and the expectations are a lot higher, right? Would you say?
Completely different landscape, very high expectations throughout the whole value chain, as well as with retailers and brands, and the consumers becoming much more educated. How many times now are we seeing on TikTok or Instagram, the landfills that are in South Africa or in South America? This has become now raised to our attention in mainstream media. And now consumers are starting to understand that they need to make that change. And again, and I've mentioned this several times, policy will force that to happen.
Do you think policy is moving quickly enough? I know out of Europe it is. I think it's happening a lot more aggressively. We're starting to see different things in different countries. How about here in the U.S.? But overall, is policy pushing you hard?
I think policy is making a lot of the players, the stakeholders, change quickly. Europe definitely moving fast. Even last week, another directive came out. Of course, it's like 300 pages. So this is the part is that it takes quite a bit to decipher it.
Yeah.
Policy in the US, of course, it takes a little bit longer, but that's because they realize that the right stakeholders need to provide input. Also in the US, we go state by state. We see New York with the Fashion Act and California, SB 707, that are leading, but, very impressive that Massachusetts kind of came up with their EPR. So getting the right stakeholders at the table to develop the proper legislation will be key in order for it really to be effective and create the change that's needed.
So we'll keep an eye on that. It seems like you said, every week there's something new happening somewhere that everybody has to keep up on. And that is one thing I hear kind of working in the sustainability space is sort of everybody's going into panic mode going, what do I need to do to make sure we're in line with these? So I think policy and regulations are a big, important part of this, of pushing us forward. But like you said, so is the consumer. Retailers play a role, the brands play a role, suppliers, everybody plays a role. And I think it's slowly starting to come together. You guys are obviously making great strides, big innovations. What are the challenges though that you still face? What's kind of keeping you from, or is there nothing? Or is it investment? Is it technology that you're waiting on? Is it the policy? What's still holding you back, would you say, or the whole movement back in the big picture?
I would say the commitments from the brands, that they really give the right signal to the market, not just make a statement. Let's develop that roadmap, make the commitment, invest financially as well as in offtake agreements, that it is truly the direction that you're taking. I would say that's one way. And also that people are realistic in understanding it's the long-term change that needs to happen. So when we're asked to do everything all at once, and we're, a company of 130 people, talking to a company that might have, 7,000-8,000 people, understanding that, it has to happen in these incremental changes, looking at long-term impact.
And what do you say to a brand who says, hey, we'd love to, sustainability is a priority for us, we've got all these targets, but I need it to be cost neutral. Can you make it cost neutral? What do you say to them?
I say, let me explain the whole process to you and come visit us and you see. We are working to scale, so we will get, and the market has to get to the right level. It's not just us. I also say to them, look, the cost of pulp and the total cost of a garment, if it's less than 1% to put this in there, that doesn't mean your garment has to cost you 40 and 50% more. This bullwhipping that happens in the industry. And also, it's how we can continue to build and scale so we get out of batch productions. The more efficiency that you can build out of running consistently will help to lower that price. So it all goes back to having the commitment around volume. But yes, that question always comes up. Oh, and they don't want, and it's usually not just cost neutral, it's lower cost.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'd love the idea. Of course we want it. Yeah. Can you do it cheaper?
Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way. Is there, for circularity, is it out of reach? Is this a reality? Is this something that you and I will see sort of come to full fruition in our professional lifetime, do you think? Are we 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out from really having a holistic system that is churning and working, and where most of our products are made from post-consumer textile, unused textiles?
I think it will come. It will go through phases, because first we're looking at how we globally can solve this. Then we'll move into more of a regional, and then I think we'll look to kind of perfect. That will all happen at one time, but there's a very good organization, World Circular Textiles Day, and they have a road to 2050. And at first I was like, 2050? I'm not even going to be in this industry by 2050. Right. But I think when you break it down of what's going to happen for that change, we'll see a big burst of change, between now and 2030. But then I see that we'll shift towards where we can make it more efficient within a regional level.
So you're hopeful, you're optimistic.
I'm extremely optimistic, or I wouldn't be in it, and I want to give my all and contribute towards that with my optimism.
Yeah, well, we'll kind of wrap things up here, but I do want, before I let you go, I do want to see if I can get some advice from you, to aspiring sustainability professionals, people that are already in the apparel industry or the textile industry going, I hear I hear about sustainability, I hear about circularity. What advice do you have for people that either are, working towards this space, want to be in this space, or maybe they're not going to be a sustainability specific person? They're just not just, but they're a designer, or a merchandiser. What advice do you have for people related to the work that you're doing in circularity?
Be curious, keep learning, get your feet on the ground, go visit a recycling center. It is amazing when you see that. Visit us. We offer open houses. Every month we're offering some open houses. So reach out to us. I think it's just keep asking questions, keep learning, because there's no, it's evolving at such a quick pace. There's no one way to learn, and you have to keep up to date on everything. Be curious.
Is there anything we left out for you? I mean, you guys there's so much happening. Where do you want people to keep up with you at, and what might we have left out in this conversation?
Derek, I think we covered pretty much everything. And I really enjoyed the conversation. If people want to stay up to date, they can follow me on LinkedIn, or follow Renewcell also on LinkedIn, or you can sign up for our newsletter. You can go to CIRCULOSE and find out about new programs that are coming out at the retailer brand level, and register for our monthly email newsletter there. So we welcome all of your questions, and we look at ways to make fashion circular by doing it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to put all the links to the board, the nonprofits that you're working with, the NGOs that you're working with, to Renewcell, CIRCULOSE. Great idea to get on the newsletter, because there's a lot of good information on the website as well. You guys are breaking it down nice and clear, and just getting the pulse of the updates is really exciting too, to here's something new. We just released this. We just, brought on a new partner. It's exciting to see the whole thing kind of starting to swirl together. So congratulations on the success that you guys are seeing on your new role. I'm so excited for you in this next part of your professional journey. So thank you for making time, because I know you are so busy. I really appreciate it, though. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Derek. Great work with the podcast. Keep it going, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
All right, same. Thank you, Tricia, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening. This is a show produced by the Underswell and our School of Understanding. If you're interested in being a part of this movement and want to dive deeper into the art of understanding sustainability better so that you can do things better, be sure to visit us at theunderswell.com. We offer structured, easy-to-follow workshops, courses, and member resources to make sustainability a part of your career or lifestyle. Because remember, no matter what role you play a role, and we're here for you. Thanks again.